What's up, guys? Brian Grossman here with Grossman Woodworking and DIY, and on today's video I'm going to run through my 9 go-to woodworking tools that I use on just about a daily basis. These are the 9 tools that I find myself reaching for day after day and project after project. Now, I've been struggling with this video for a couple of weeks now because originally I had it mapped out in my head as the 9 essential tools for a beginning woodworker. But what I struggled with was I did not want any of you thinking that you had to have all 9 of these tools to get started or to build your first woodworking project, because that's certainly not the case. There's a lot of guys out there that got their start with just a circular saw and a drill, or heck, even a handsaw and a drill, and you can build a lot of projects that way. In fact, the kids' picnic table build that I just did here recently, you could easily do, again, with just a circular saw and a drill. But as you grow as a woodworker, as you dive into more projects, I think you're going to want to acquire these 9 tools we're going to cover here today as quickly as you can, whether that's a week into the future or months into the future. It's not a race, but you're going to find yourself wanting these tools at some point in your woodworking journey. So, hey, with all that, guys, we're going to go ahead and jump into the list, start with number 1. First item on the list, guys, is a miter saw, but keep in mind, these aren't in any order of importance. They're not necessarily in the order I would buy them in. It's just the order that I wrote them down in when I planned this video out. But I did put the miter saw at the top because this was my first kind of woodworking tool, power tool purchase. And this is it. This is the first one I ever bought, no Black & Decker. I gave $25 for that off of Facebook Marketplace, and it still works to this day. Now, it's very basic. It just does 90-degree cuts, and it'll only cut about a 6-inch wide board max. Not too long into my woodworking journey, I was able to borrow my father-in-law's Admiral. This is a Harbor Freight miter saw. I think it's probably about 299 bucks, something like that. And it does a great job. It does the vertical bevel cuts. It does, of course, the horizontal miter cuts. And it's also on a slide, so I can cut things up to 12 inches wide, maybe a little wider, but I know it'll cut a 12-inch board. So definitely an upgrade, but it is a borrowed tool for now. He doesn't do woodworking anymore. It's sitting in the corner of his garage collecting dust. So he let me bring it down here and mount it on my workbench, and I've been using that here the last month or so. And it's definitely an upgrade from the old Black & Decker. Of course, this is a tool you're going to use to make all your cross cuts. Again, with this one, I can cut any board up to about 12 inches wide. I can cut those miters. I can cut those bevels, whatever I need to do. Again, you can build a lot of projects with just this miter saw and something like a drill or some of these other little small tools that we're going to discuss here in just a few minutes. So definitely put a miter saw on your list. If you're on a budget, hey, don't hesitate to hit up places like Facebook Marketplace, yard sales, flea markets, that kind of thing. And I feel like you'll be able to find one pretty cheap to get you started. The next item on the list is one I've already mentioned a couple times already, and that's the power drill. And again, when you pair this with a circular saw or a miter saw, there is a whole lot of woodworking projects that you can put together. And I know I don't need to explain to you what to do with a power drill. You can drill your holes, you can shoot screws in your woodworking project, but it's definitely a must-have for a beginner woodworker. You're going to want to pick up a good bit set to go along with it. But hey, if you're on a budget, I know the cordless battery power tools are all the rage right now, but don't be afraid to pick up a corded drill if you need to, particularly if you're buying used off of Facebook Marketplace, flea market, that kind of thing. You can probably pick up a good corded drill now for, I would say, 20, 30 bucks tops to get you started. And then you can work your way up to the cordless battery powered at some point, because these get expensive. The drills themselves aren't always that expensive, but when you start adding the batteries and the chargers, it does add up pretty quick. So as long as you're in a shop setting or you have outlets handy, don't be afraid to go with a corded drill if you need to. Well, number 3 is the table saw, and I guess you already figured that out since it's sitting here in front of me, but there's a lot of debate among woodworkers about whether you'd first want a miter saw or a table saw. For me personally, it was the miter saw. However, it really depends on what type of woodworking projects you're working on. You're going to want both at some point and fairly early in your woodworking journey. But if you're not super familiar with the table saw, it's used a lot to rip down wider boards into thinner boards. Is basically one of the main functions for it. So I use it a lot with my cedar fence picket projects, things like planter boxes and squirrel feeders and that kind of thing. It does a great job of that. And of course, it can break down bigger boards too, up to, you know, full sheets of plywood for cabinet makers, that kind of thing. So a lot of versatility here. You can buy or build different jigs for it to even make similar cuts as to what you make on a miter saw. So there is some argument there about how a table saw could serve both functions early on. But regardless, you're going to want both at some point. And again, for me, this was a Facebook Marketplace find. I think I gave 75 bucks for this Ryobi table saw. And I often see other ones on Marketplace for 100 to 200 bucks. You can pick up a new one that's decent for probably in the $300 range. I hear a lot of good things about the Skill model table saw. I believe the Hercules from Harbor Freight's pretty good as well. I'm a fan of Cobalt tools from Lowe's. So there's a lot of options out there if you're on a budget. But regardless, a table saw is definitely something you're going to want in your shop, and probably sooner than later. The next item on the list, number 4, is an orbital sander. You're going to want some type of sander because if you're a new woodworker, what you're going to find out real quick is a big part of woodworking is sanding. Lots and lots of sanding to get that product nice and smooth and finished. So you're going to need a good tool to get that done. I actually started out with this old Black & Decker, had this thing for several years, sanded a lot of projects with it, and it finally died on me here recently. Left me in a bit of a pinch. I needed one pretty quick, so I had to run to the local Walmart and just picked up this cheap Hyper Tough for about 30 bucks. And honestly, it's doing a fine job. I've already probably got my 30 bucks worth out of it. So anything beyond that is just going to be gravy as far as I'm concerned. Again, I want to eventually upgrade to one of the cordless battery-powered orbital sanders, but just haven't made that leap yet. Honestly, I just haven't figured out yet what manufacturer I'm going to go with when it comes to battery-powered tools. I have one DeWalt and one Ryobi already, but not a lot, and I'm kind of on the fence about how to move forward from this point. The DeWalt tools are pretty expensive. I know they're good tools, but I think there's some other options out there that are a little more budget-friendly, get the job done for a fairly new woodworker like myself. But that's the topic for a whole other video. Just know that you're going to need an orbital sander to get those woodwork projects looking nice and finished. Number 5 is the good old tape measure. And this is why I had such a hard time trying to put these in any kind of order of importance, because where would you put a tape measure? I mean, honestly, it could be number 1. You're going to have a hard time building any woodworking project without some way to measure your materials. But then again, you can't build anything with a tape measure alone. So you got to have some of these other tools we're talking about here today. That's why I scrapped trying to put these in any kind of order. You're going to have to decide the order for yourself. But I can tell you, you're going to need a tape measure from day 1 as you start your woodworking journey. There's just no getting around that. And not only do you need to have one, you need to learn how to use one. Know what every little mark on here is for, how to read this thing. There's a reason you often hear woodworkers say, measure twice, cut once. All your accuracy depends on that tape measure. All right, number 6 on my list is one that I did not realize just how important they were until I got into my woodworking journey, and that is clamps. There are a lot of different types of clamps out there for woodworking projects, and you're going to need some. And honestly, you can never have too many. There's clamps like these, what they call these F clamps, parallel clamps, little hand clamps for small items. I even picked up these little right angle clamps for joining boards at 90 degrees off of Amazon. I'll put a link to that down in the description below. But again, you can never have too many clamps. If you're doing any type of woodworking projects that requires gluing boards together, you're going to need a way to hold those boards together until the glue dries. And that's where those clamps come in. Or sometimes it might just be holding boards together. So while you shoot screws into them or nail them or whatever the case may be, you're going to find yourself needing clamps at some point early in your woodworking journey, I can almost promise you. Now, there's certainly makeshift ways that you can get by until you can get some of these in hand, but definitely put them high on your shopping list, though, as you start to build up your tools for woodworking. And number 7 was also one of those items that I did not realize how important it was until I picked one up and started incorporating it into my woodworking projects, and that's the square. And the square comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and you're probably going to want one of each of these at some point. But if you're just getting started, just pick you up a speed square. I think I gave less than $4 for this at Harbor Freight. And of course, all the big box stores carry these, Amazon, whatever the case may be. You won't have any problem finding the speed square. And it does what you need it to do, which is just ensure that your angles are at 90 degrees. If you're building out any kind of box, you can just drop that in the corner, slide it up there, and again, just make sure that those boards are meeting at 90 degrees. It also gives you a perfect 45-degree angle here if you need that. And then, of course, once you learn to read it, which there's a lot of great videos out there, tutorials on how to read a speed square, then you can figure out pretty much any angle you need to, roof pitch, a whole bunch of different things. A very useful tool and one you'll definitely want in your arsenal. It's a great less than $10 insurance policy that you're going to want for your woodworking projects. Number 8 on my list is a brad nailer or a nail gun, whatever you want to call it. It's something I do find myself using pretty regular in my woodworking projects. I would not call this a necessity, but it's certainly something that you can get a lot of use out of. And a lot of that's going to depend on what type of projects you're building. If you're doing a lot of these small, like fence picket type projects, the planter boxes, squirrel feeders, bird houses, that kind of stuff, man, these things are super handy and you're going to use them a lot. If you're strictly building bigger projects like furniture, then you may not need a brad nailer. You may strictly be using screws or other types of joinery methods. And this may be very low on your priority list. So it really boils down to what you're building as to how important a brad nailer will be to you. But for me, I do use this pretty regular. Now, my particular brad nailer is air powered, but just like a lot of other tools on the market now, you can get battery powered brad nailers. There are a lot of good options out there. And if you do get an air powered one like this one, then you're going to need number 9 on my list, which is an air compressor. And this is my air compressor. I picked this up several years ago from Harbor Freight. It's a McGraw. It's a fairly inexpensive model. In fact, I think my wife got it for me for some type of birthday or Christmas anniversary, something. But it was a great gift at the time because all I had was a pancake air compressor that had died on me. So I needed one bad, not just for woodworking, but for a variety of reasons. Air up tires, blow things off. There's a whole lot of uses for a compressor other than just woodworking, but it's definitely something if you're going to use any kind of air tools like brad nailers, you're going to need some type of air compressor. Doesn't necessarily have to be a 20-gallon like this one. Again, you can get by with one of the little pancake ones if you're just going to be using a nail gun. If you're going to be doing actual painting from an air sprayer, then you're going to need a bigger, more expensive model. But it just all depends on what you're going to do with it. Again, I did not put my list in order of importance, but if I did, this one would probably be down near the bottom, but it just all depends on what you're going to do, and it definitely gets a lot of use here in my shop. All right, guys, that's my 9 go-to items as a beginning woodworker, but in hindsight, I guess I should have said 10 because I cannot end this video without talking about PPE or personal protective equipment. Do not even start your first basic woodworking project without some of this equipment. Specifically eye protection. Make sure you're protecting your eyes with some type of protective glasses like these that I picked up from Home Depot. These even have readers in the bottom if you got old eyes like I do. That helps me tremendously. You'll also want some type of hearing protection if you're using any of these power equipment, the miter saw, the table saw, and especially if you got something like a planer. Those things I found out recently are super loud. You definitely want to protect your hearing. And you definitely want to protect your lungs with some type of mask. Most of us beginning woodworkers don't have the benefit of a nice dust collection system. So that makes these masks even more important than ever. It can be something as simple as an N95 mask, which is going to help, but it's not ideal. Ideally, you'll want one of these 3M style masks with a type of filter like this P100 that takes over 99%, like 99.6%. Of those fine dust particles. It filters that out and keeps that stuff out of your lungs because that is nothing to mess around with. You definitely do not want to damage your lungs. You don't want to damage your eyes, and you don't want to damage your hearing. So keep that in mind. And guys, as always, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button and little notification bell. Help me grow this channel to 10,000 and beyond. And as always, I will see you guys on the next video.